We've made a lot of progress over these 10 years, and brought salvation to many parts of the world once thought lost. Together, we did this. It is only when we do not work together that darkness surrounds us. You have your differences, I have my differences with each of you, but isn't the whole reason for our success that we do not let our differences be our weakness? Now, you all know the nature of our discussion today. The Romans cannot be allowed to resume their exploitation of innocent souls. And these Romans are not the usual kind. They're what they call Britannian Romans. Romans from a distant land and a distant time, who have returned to this world to undo the progress not just of our happy 10 years, but of hundreds of years. A spectre from the past. Strong men, and yet men who fight alone and against many foes. Even the Romans of today fear and despise this returning shadow. Thus we see that Britannians are fractured, whereas we are one, unity. The combined power of reason and justice in a world still unsure if we can save them. Each of you commands many brave warriors, as do I. If all of us were to march west to put an end to the folly of the Romans, of all breeds, is there a force that could stop us? Only that of the gods will suffice, and the will of the gods is known as clear to us, as it was the day I first spoke to you all, the day we first heard the voices of the common people and gods alike calling out for heroes. You answered that call by coming to my side. Now answer my call. Make ready for a war of unprecedented nobility. Make ready to save this world from the fallen demons of Rome. Hello and welcome back to Fields of Mars. In the previous episode we saw Constans creating a new puppet state out of Macedonia, the Roman separatist faction, and he could use that new puppet state to reform his army ready for an attack on Constantinopolis. The city was only lightly defended, so it proved relatively easy to take, but the problem was, by attacking an eastern faction he called in a massive alliance of other factions into the war. It also forced Tullus out to take Tarentum, which was now at war with us on the Italian peninsula. But before that could really get started, we had a new conflict back in Britannia when the Angles attacked, and they surprised me by actually bothering to cover their flanks, so I couldn't just destroy them with cavalry rear attacks like usual. So we'll have to just see what we can do with the rest of this fight, and the main angle of attack to start with is going to be to go after all the troops who aren't in the main blob of enemy units. Luckily those troops are pretty weak because the enemy brought so many war dogs units that they're just all over the place and they're not very good in melee, so our cavalry units can take them down, and those archers are of course always a prime target for cavalry as well. They're going to reinforce their position by sending in more war dogs, so that's great for us. We'll just let that keep happening. And they had a couple of units isolated on their own attacking the town from other angles, so our cavalry were able to do the usual tactics there. Meanwhile, their blob is just trying to push through our units here, and it's going to be successful, at least eventually, because it has so many troops, and many of their troops are actually better than ours, especially the axe troops that are in there can do very well against our medium infantry units trying to hold the line. Now we are still going to want to try and get a rear attack on that main blob, and luckily an opportunity to do so eventually arises because the enemy pikemen guarding the flanks decide to come and investigate all this ruckus where my cavalry are killing the war dogs and archers. So my cav now quickly needs to escape, which proves difficult because they can't resist attacking the shattered troops around them, so they get stuck in the fighting animations as the pikes creep ever closer. But of course what this means is that the pikes have been drawn away from what they're supposed to be guarding. The big blob there is now exposed to attack, and in the background you can see I've got a unit of cavalry just waiting for such an opportunity, so they now spring into action. The only possible defense the enemy have at this point is that I might not actually be attacking units that are at the front because the blob is so big, but usually they all get mixed up, and hitting guys at the back also counts as hitting the guys at the front because parts of the unit are up there somewhere, and you end up technically getting a rear attack on basically everyone in the blob at once. And we do start to see some shattering from this attack. Unfortunately we couldn't keep the attack going for very long because the enemy pikemen actually started to come back. And of course we lost some of our cavalrymen in the attempt to escape because cycle charges are so difficult. But we might be able to buy ourselves another opportunity later on, and that would be most useful because the enemy are working their way through our troops. But actually the Legio are holding quite well against the enemy's advance, especially because the enemy are now very exhausted. Now I did manage to draw those pikes again away from the blob, using this time some spearmen who snuck out to go for an infantry rear attack. So while the pikes go off to fight over there, we will of course simply do the cavalry rear attack again. And this time it proves to be more effective than the first time. We hit the enemy and we start to see one by one these enemy units shattering away, and we actually get most of them this time. Loads of enemies fleeing away, leaving only 3 units there, and those units have low morale as well. So that's basically the majority of the enemy's remaining force just suddenly shattered. The balance bar swinging now into our favour, and we can also take revenge on those pikes for being so annoying throughout the battle with this really juicy rear attack. You can see the pikes are fighting with their swords against my Palatina there, and now they're in big trouble as the cavalry come in for that smashing rear attack, and of course the Western Palatinate will do okay against them as well. They shatter. The rest of the enemy's army is in huge trouble now. We could rear attack them whenever we want, but our cavalry are currently having a little bit of fun just attacking these huge columns of troops trying to escape from the battle. The enemy have so many men routing that we can't really stop them all. A lot of them are going to actually escape from there because our cavalry can't kill them in time. Now I could go and rear attack these guys, but it turns out I don't actually need to because they're going to shatter on their own. They're just going to give up the fight at this stage. They can't push through our remaining troops, even though our remaining troops are also on the verge of routing. We almost lost the melee there, but we got away with it. I actually had a unit of medium infantry in reserve there that can now rush in using their superior stamina from resting the whole battle to start smashing up those routing units, of particular importance because I think one of the units around here is one of the enemy's generals. So the battle actually went on for another minute or so while I tried to hunt him down and make sure that we got him, but it eventually is called as a close victory for our forces. So once again the people of Britannia have managed to save themselves from a potential barbarian invasion. Definitely a running theme. All of our port defense battles tend to go very well. Here's the actual result. Our forces really wrecked by the fight. Not much left after that, but the enemy faring much worse, especially considering their initial strength. Their armies really demolished here. 2 officers dead, their king sneakily surviving, but most of his army gone as well. We can ransom off some prisoners back to them to make some money. And the question now was, would they just form up and attack again? Because they probably still have a stack's worth of troops around. But it doesn't look like it. Most of them seem to just sail away, leaving a few behind just to keep watch. So that's the war in Britannia hopefully over, and we're snapping back to the war in the east as yet another eastern faction declares war on us. That's where the action's going to be. I was inspired by a discovery I made a few days ago, the original copy of my father's campaign diaries. Quite different to the version he had written up and forced on the Senate. He goes from utter confidence to throes of self-doubt within mere pages. It's clear to me he was not entirely sure he was doing the right thing, but never wished to say as much. Indeed, the edited version reads much better, but it made me realize that one must take a record of their intentions, thoughts, and actions, for if no such record exists, then people will come up with all sorts of fanciful ideas to fill the void, and rumours are more often than not harmful things for a man of authority. So here I am, not sure what to say right now. Well, I stopped an Anglo invasion this week. With Constantinopolis a little more secure and Constance's army in better condition, he can think about starting to attack some of the many targets around him. And just to the east, this town Nicomedia is held by only a few units as a garrison, so I thought I might as well just move out and quickly defeat that garrison army. Not because we want to actually expand here into Asia, because it would be too difficult to hold this territory and Constantinopolis since they're in different regions, different provinces technically. So we'll just come over here, defeat the enemy, sack the city to take their money, and quickly head back to replenish and continue charging up the public order in the city there. So that's just showing that we mean business basically to the Eastern powers by quickly diminishing their resources in the region. Now on the diplomatic front, I'm talking once again to the Eastern Roman Empire about marriage. I want to get a wife for Aurelianus. It's definitely about time he got one, especially since he is now consul, and who better than a member of the old imperial family of the Eastern Roman Empire. So he will now have some lineage back to previous emperors, which will give him some conservative support. And of course, having such a highborn wife will cement his position as a leader over our own people. Now in the end turn sequence, the Mazun forces who were there in Sardinia come and attack the city with Aurelianus inside, which cancels his recruitment, so he doesn't have any troops there to aid him apart from the garrison. We also see a stack from Britannia go and attack what I believe is the last city of the Eastern Roman Empire, so they could be in trouble if they can't get out of that siege right there. First though, we need to deal with our own siege. That's the main focus here. The stack besieging us isn't too powerful actually, so we're not in huge trouble. You can see all my units have 0 turns to recruit, because they're sort of weirdly half recruited because of the siege cancelling things. But of course we do have the garrison. It has an extra unit because it's the capital, and we have a governor named Varus who's going to be taking part in the fight with us. So we get a vaguely balanced fight. The enemy having numerical advantage, but our troops possibly slightly better. The enemy has a lot of generic spears in there, and we do have Aurelianus of course, and he has Praetorian cavalry, a unit we haven't seen yet, and we'll see it in this battle. So the battle got started when the enemy came to attack my right flank, where I'd positioned the weaker units, the medium infantry and the archers. What I wanted to do was use these archers to combat the enemy's Javcav, since that is technically the counter to Javcav, but it doesn't work in practice, as I think I've said before in this series. Archers are very unpowerful as a unit in this particular game. So it basically does nothing, and we just start taking big losses to that Javcav. Meanwhile, they tried to make a cavalry flank attack, but I had my own cavalry on this flank as well, so we just went in to engage them, and I'll use a second unit to outflank the enemy's cavalry and then defeat them in that area. I'm going to have to run away from those Javcav because they're just dealing too many casualties. I thought maybe if I can draw them a bit closer to the archers, so the archers have better line of sight, we'll do more damage to them. Meanwhile, my front line of Legio and Palatina spears is just waiting to engage the enemy, and they've already engaged here on the left, where they sent in their light cavalry to attack my spears. I thought that would be fine, but they're actually hacking through my spearmen somehow, back just because of the difficulty level. So I'm going to have to deploy the Praetorian Cav with Aurelianus. This is pretty much the only heavy cavalry unit we can deploy until very, very late in the game as a faction using the Imperium Praetoria unit, so we really need to make good use of them when we have them, and they're extremely expensive to upkeep, so we shouldn't give all our generals that unit. Now those Javcav continuing their rampage, my archers still attempting to take them down but doing not very much, so the Javcav are likely going to get through all of their ammo. In fact, they definitely are, because these archer volleys just aren't doing the damage we need it to. There isn't really a counter to Javcav in the game, unfortunately, so we just deal with it and then fight them as an easier melee unit later on. Meanwhile, the infantry may have to take part in actual infantry combat because the enemy sent a couple of units over here. Was kind of reluctant because these medium infantry units aren't actually very good, but I'm going to be forced to just to keep the enemy locked down. Wasn't enough though really, because there were still unlocked down enemy units like this one unit of cav which returned from routing later in the fight, sneaking through and smashing my archers. There's only a few cavalrymen actually in there, but it's enough to take out the whole unit of archers, so they're in huge trouble. Varus with his guards is now forced to defend the back of our central line as the enemy start folding our right flank. It's not looking very good, and Aurelianus is setting up to cycle charge that area from behind. Meanwhile though, things are going better on our left flank, where we're slowly folding the enemy, surrounding them and destroying them. And here, an enemy unit actually tried to run out of the melee combat, which does not work at all in Attila, and they were wiped out for free, so that started turning that engagement really in our favour. It's very nice of them to do that. So now it's time to take on the enemy's general who came up onto our right flank, and I sent Aurelianus to deal with him, so it's basically heavy cav on heavy cav up there, and just hope that we win the engagement. I committed scout equites in there as well, not that they'll do very well against the enemy general, but just to reduce his morale, try and get him to rout a little bit faster. Because of course if we can take out the general up there, all of these spear troops, which are mostly just tier 1 rubbishy spears, may just rout entirely, and we could use that very much because the infantry fight isn't looking very nice there. The enemy have a hill advantage and numerical advantage. Luckily the enemy general does rout to Aurelianus' attack, and we're going to start chasing down those routing units in the hope of taking the general out, and in a second we actually do it. There it is. So fantastic. This is going to completely turn the battle. You can see the balance bar starts shifting noticeably in our favour as the enemy just goes, nope, we're not fighting now that the general has gone. And it's just in time because we're about to lose everything here. Varus managed to survive as the last unit's still fighting at least. Plus, now we can make those cavalry rear attacks with the cav freed up by not having to fight the enemy's general, and that's really the end for the enemy force. And also good news for these archers back here who are still actually fighting with enemies. The enemy committed melee troops all the way to our rear. So our formation was basically completely compromised in that fight. The enemy really did have an advantage, but the loss of the general completely turned it. The Praetorian cav proving to be very effective for the 1,000 or so a turn they cost in upkeep. So that's nice, and a nice first land victory for Aurelianus. Still can't believe we did it. You should have seen everyone. Amazing work. But now I'm just dying to know what the people in the town are saying about it. The losses for the common troops were rather high, but we won. We won, and so surely they can find some time to speak of the general that brought them that victory. I really hope so. I feel like they ought to. And I feel like I really am consul now, you know? I mean, isn't this what it's about? Winning battles, championing the people, making your name known far and wide. It's good, really. I didn't think I'd even get the chance, but I feel so much better about it now. Once I have my legions, I think I'll get right into the swing of all this. I must make it my mission to push Tullus into an early retirement. So that siege is over pretty much as soon as it began, and here in the results I wanted to take a little look at the damage done by the enemy's cavalry, and it's quite a lot, spoiler. So at least we destroyed most of their army, meaning they wouldn't be able to attack us again. So even though our army is in terrible condition too, we're going to replenish. They can't really do anything to enhance their strength. We should be fine here. Plus, if they don't re-besiege us, Aurelianus can now start recruiting troops as originally planned. And I wanted to see what would happen with this 0 turns left to recruit thing. I couldn't add enough extra units onto the queue to represent a whole nother turn's recruitment there. So they still count as being in the recruitment list, which is unfortunate, so we will effectively have to wait a turn to recruit them, it seems. Now, back over to Constans, where he's going to move out west this time, once again to just attack an enemy town with a small garrison and take it down, but this time with a slightly different objective than last time, because this town, Tarentum I think it's called, is actually in the same province as Constantinople. So taking this will help us manage public order, which is a problem right now, and things like food and sanitation will be easy to manage. We're basically just getting ourselves more building slots here is the only purpose to this. So we'll occupy this settlement and take a look at what it's got in it. And it actually has a pretty good setup to complement Constantinople, because it has sanitation and food production, which is exactly what we need, plus some public order production, which is going to be great as well. So we'll start repairing that place up, but Constans will have to basically abandon it in favour of the city, so it's just going to be out there. The enemy can retake it whenever they want, but while we still have it, it's going to be providing us with benefits. Now moving on once again, we see the Sassanid Empire move a stack up near to Constantinople, so we can only really assume that they're coming up here to counterattack us, so we are going to have to prepare for that. But first, some rebels at Tarentum make an attack against the city, and you might remember I'd said previously I wanted Tarentum to basically be taken by rebels so that I could indirectly give it to the Eastern Roman Empire in some way and give them a foothold away from their beleaguered base out to sea, but the rebel army didn't grow large enough to guarantee they're actually going to take the city. They've gone for a balanced engagement here, and I basically decided that what we'll do here is we'll try and fight this fight, since we don't see many walled city siege defences in the campaign, and if the people of Tarentum can successfully defend themselves against the rebels, then that will be sufficient proof of their dedication to us, and we will go put the effort, money and resources into trying to build that city up and try and secure the province so that we can actually hold it for any length of time. So the battle will start with the enemy making use of their siege weapons. The enemy has an army that's actually very well suited to a siege assault. They've got long-range ballista and onagers. You saw a ballista bolt just bouncing off my onager there. But they are using them poorly, of course. So first they're going to be attacking with the infantry at the same time as their artillery attack. They could have waited until my towers were destroyed or the walls were breached before they made an infantry attack, but they're not going to. So that will help us out quite a lot, actually. And they're also putting these cavalry units right in front of their ballista, and the limited anti-friendly fire code that stops units from firing in situations like this will mean that we're not going to be taking losses to our infantry on the wall from those long-range attacks. So that's all very good. It's going about as well as it could so far. The enemy, of course, don't have any ladders or rams or anything, so they can't get into the city unless they either use their onagers to make a breach or use their infantry to burn down the gates. I have one onager as a bastion, and I'm actually using it to just fire at the enemy's commander. I thought I'll just chance it because we might kill their commander, but unfortunately it didn't really happen. So as I said, the enemy are going to have to force their way through this gate to get in, so they're just going to run up to it and start slapping it about a bit, and they're going to be under tower fire while they do this, so that's quite nice for us. The gate doesn't have all that much health, so they will be able to break it down soon enough, and we don't really have anything behind it to stop them getting through. There's no plan here to actually hold the gatehouse because the defences aren't strong enough. One thing we can do is move our archers to try and fire at the enemy attacking the gate. There's this tiny bastion here where some of them can fire at the enemy while they're attacking the gate, but it basically doesn't do anything, so nothing comes of that, and soon enough the enemy will break through while the rest of our men just dodge the enemy's onager fire. So once they're inside, I pretty much immediately just abandon the position. We're not going to try and fight them here. We might as well fight them in the stronger defences in the centre of the city. So we'll run away, and the whole plan is that as we run, we'll be running past other defence towers which will slowly kill these enemy infantry. One unit, the Limitani border guards there, are nothing to worry about, but the other unit is a heavy infantry sword unit that we can't really take down using our own infantry. So I was hoping the towers would take them down, but the enemy deployed their cavalry once the gate was open, and they just caught up with my units as they tried to flee. Luckily, they are still fighting below this tower, so this will kind of work by taking out some of the enemy's cav, but it does mean we're just going to lose all of the infantry that were baiting the enemy around. The same thing here happening on the other side of the city, where my archers from the wall were trying to fall back right into the centre, but the enemy's heavy cavalry caught up with them. My archers try and run away, except this guy, he stays to chat and pays the price. I thought I might actually be able to get away with this, because I tried running the archers in front of these legio with their darts on the barricade. I thought if I stormed darts into these cavalry, it might kill a few or persuade them to go somewhere else. But these cavalry are one of the really high-level Western Roman Empire units. They have high armour, so the darts just don't really do anything. My archers are wiped out because they end up stopping to fight with them, and that's the end of that. I thought the cav might try and break through there, but actually they're going to go around and not have to fight on the barricade, which is probably the right choice. It does mean that now my light cavalry in trouble, sitting here at the back of the city as a reserve. Suddenly the enemy have come all the way through right to the back. We need to start dodging out of the way to avoid losing those units as well to this advance, and these exploratorios, the medium infantry, are going to be in trouble because they cannot escape, and effectively they will now sacrifice themselves to allow the more useful equites to escape and get behind some spears or get somewhere safe where they might be able to take part in the battle later. And the enemy are now starting their attack on the centre of the town where their cavalry are smashing through our infantry. It's not looking very good.
Why are you fighting? Lay down your arms, I say. You have nothing to gain in resisting. We're not here to pillage or destroy. We're here to restore your liberty. Britannia will do nothing for you. If the Easterners returned, your self-proclaimed leaders on that distant southern island would have you die fighting them down to the last child. You need a leader who has not lost his mind, a leader who knows how to negotiate with these foreign warlords. You need a man who will not throw his life away in foolish battles when there's plenty of potential for a good, safe life under the protection of the Shahanshah. You see, that's why I ran. That's why I did not resist. For I knew that defeat was preferable to a victory that would incur the wrath of the East. Believe me.
Our infantry in the square are having a hard time holding off the enemy's heavier, superior infantry here, and if the Legio have a hard time, then the spearmen behind them certainly will also. At least, though, we managed to get some spears down to fight those enemy heavy cavalry, and this is great because we don't really have any other chance to destroy them, so it's nice that they stayed here to let us fight them like that. Meanwhile, the Equites, who we just saved, are able to now go around the enemy's line of attack and hit this ballista crew, or the onager crew, sorry, which for some reason was running into the town. They've left all their stuff behind outside the city. Not really sure why, probably just another AI glitch, but possibly they were stuck on those rocks, I don't know. The actual ballistas didn't leave their stuff behind, so they are bringing their weapons up, and that could be deadly if they really wanted to. They could bring them up and just shoot at my lines defending the town, but they are going to continue their melee attack, and that is going pretty well for them, admittedly. They've broken through, now fighting with my final unit there in the central point. we really need to get these cavalry back to support. So first I want to wipe out these crossbowmen here, a nice high value target, and we want to wait for those Palatina guards to go into the fight. They were chasing the cav, but thankfully they stopped and started going back to the melee fight, because once they're all in there and they're all facing the other direction, we'll be able to do that big rear attack which we'll need. We defeat the commerce down with these spearmen, so that's great. These spearmen can now go back to bolster our defences in the centre, which is going to be vital because we're quickly running out of troops in that region. Now soon enough, the enemy general does go and join the melee, and my cav can come back round for that rear attack. First we captured a point just down this slope here, which will increase our morale and decrease the enemy's morale because they were occupying it. And then we make that rear attack just as our lines are breaking even more. I'm also bringing in some marines. I had 2 squads of really depleted marines who were just doing nothing, so I thought I might as well use them for this. It might have some effect. We routed their Limitani border guards, which is the one I cared least about of the 3 units to rout, and now it's a grind against the 2 superior units. And I'm going to use cycle charges because our cavalry aren't really good enough to fight in this melee. And on the second charge, I believe, things go a little bit better than the first, especially because the enemy were now already fighting to their rear with the few marines in there, which gives them a morale debuff. So being hit by the cavalry as well must be especially displeasing. So we come in there and we see that the enemy's Protectors Domestica, I think they're called, the heavy infantry, start wavering, and that's the unit we really need to get rid of because we're really struggling to kill them with our remaining troops. And they're wavering and wavering, we really need them to go, so I'm leaving the cavalry in there to just prolong the fight and see if they'll go. And eventually they do, and that's pretty much the battle won right there. That's a turning point because without that unit they can't defeat the rest of my infantry because Palatina Guards are very weak as an infantry unit. And at this point the Palatina Guards also rout anyway, so as they attempt to escape they'll find that they can't, take heavy losses, and the battle is going to end right there. It's a Pyrrhic victory for the people of Tarentum. They lost pretty much everything to stop this attack, but all importantly they did stop the attack. So according to my own rules, I probably should now go and give Tarentum some more attention. Here's the results. The enemy commander and some of the infantry actually survived. Our forces in awful condition, but not important right now because we've dealt enough casualties to the enemy to get rid of the threat for now. So heading into the next turn, here's an example of what happens every turn, but I cut it out. We get like 5 or 6 different hostile agent things because now we're at war with the Eastern powers. They're just spamming agents all over the place. Every time I deploy an agent, they just jump on them, and they're also starting to go after my generals as well. So in this region, Constans needs to rush back to Constantinopolis because the Sassanid stack that I mentioned has moved up and might attack it, so we'll just prepare for that. And now back in Tarentum, we'll start giving them some love at last. And the city is actually pretty developed. It's got some decent buildings. I'll have to repair their religious buildings before I can convert it over to my own ones. And the rest of the stuff is already pretty much exactly what we need, so that should be okay once it's repaired to just leave it all as it is. So it's going to make us quite a lot of money, this city. It's pretty decent, but it's going to be really hard to maintain because they have pretty much no food. The squalor is terrible also, so we really need to actually take other regions in the province. There's a desolate one we can build and a Roman one we could potentially take if we can find the resources to do so, but I think we will now. Sources indicate a lack of consistency in whether citizens of the Britannian territories considered themselves to be Roman. The main divide comes between peoples conquered by other groups before the arrival of the Britannians. The people of Constantinopolis, for example, considered their new protectors to be Roman, while the people of Italia considered them to be particularly organised foederati allies. After all, most of the Britannian troops at the time were of Celtic ethnicity, but were unmistakably Roman in their culture. Cause existed to call the Britannians whatever felt convenient. But the longer they held the Roman homelands, the more easy it would become to convince people that the Western Roman Empire was in fact the rebel movement. So that's all for now, thanks for watching. There'll be challenges for Constans coming from the east, and in fact challenges for Aurelianus and Tullus in the next episode of Fields of Mars.